There we go.
You're listening to another episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
How are y'all doing today? Another blistering hot day, which is good for your business, right, Michelle? Because, you can work inside, a lot better deal than working outside. And I got Michel Umphrey here from Hotworks, and we're going to talk a little about business, but we'll talk mostly about what's on her mind because she is an interested citizen of this community, and she has thoughts and questions about this whole political thing and this whole government thing. How does it work? Why does it seem to be so screwy? And that kind of thing. Is that about right?
I have questions. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so we can talk about, and also a little bit, if we have time, what it's like running a business in this environment, not politically, but economically. But if we don't get to that, then we'll have her on again because the door's always open. But anyway, we got lots going on today, and I hope you all are having a good day. So we're going to jump right into the sponsors, at least the first round. Thank you to Daniel, CrossFit Burleson. Now, CrossFit and Hotworks actually complement each other, don't they?
Very well.
Yeah, so, CrossFit's more throwing the iron around and, all this other type of more of a workout, whereas when they go to you, I've seen you got like 12 different options to work out with.
11.
12
if you count the FX zone. But what we do for someone that's an avid CrossFitter is it gives you an opportunity to come in and get active muscle recovery and some range of motion and flexibility that enhances your CrossFit experience.
Well, when you first came on board, I talked to Daniel, said, hey, this is pretty close to what you're doing. He says, no, it's actually very complimentary. So he was glad to see you on board. But it's on 317 Southwest Wilshire, and you can go and check out their webpage for their membership plans and workout plans and training regimens and things of that nature. And also Shandy's Dogs Deal with the Dogs Deal Group. Real estate is a big deal here in Burleson. You're a resident of Burleson, right?
I am.
Yeah, and so you know as well as anybody, I know you're looking for a house, are you not? Or will be one day. And it's tough, isn't it?
It is challenging.
Yeah, it is. It is tough. And so you need somebody like Shandy to hold your hand and walk through it with you because a lot of these houses go for sale before they even hit the market. So
some of them are sold before they hit the
right.
market.
I know of several instances where they just told their realtor, we're going to put this for sale, and they sold it within a week, and it didn't even make the listings or anything else like that. So it's you need somebody with an inside knowledge of what's going on. Just like with the economic situation with Rex over in Cleveland with the Russell Wealth Group, hit myfinancialbox.com, say it right, dummy, myfinancialbox.com, and you get to know him, get to see his video, have a little coffee, have a little conversation on what's going on with the markets. They're going up and down, mostly down it seems like, but I don't know. I've had several shows in the last 2 months, and I have concerns about the economy, but we're doing okay, and I hope you're doing okay. Okay, because the next sponsor is a good friend of ours, Gayla, over at Southern Gym. I bet you've been there before.
I love Gayla and Southern Gym.
I know she really has good inventory. Robin's working there now.
That's very dangerous.
Did you meet Robin?
I did briefly.
Right.
We need a more proper introduction, so maybe I need to go shop at Southern Gym again.
There you go. She's there today, but you're right. It is dangerous, and you're like the 19th person that's told me that. When I say that, Robin works at Southern Gym, they go, hold on to your, it's not that the jewelry is very expensive or anything like that. It just there's a lot to choose from, and they have all these other services. They've repaired stuff for us, and they clean, and
she does an amazing job at repairing. She's repaired some heirloom pieces for my daughter that look incredible.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, well that's good. I like to hear that. The people have actually used the product because they can testify more than I can even. Sure. And then here's you. So tell us about Hotworks.
So we are 24/7 member access infrared fitness studio. We offer 11 different workouts within 7 saunas. And then we also have our FX zone, which is not infrared heated. It is a weight room where you can go in and do more traditional lifting. The beauty of Hotworks is we do use infrared in our saunas. So it is not convection heat, which means that we're not heating the air. We are using infrared energy, which is radiant. And when that energy comes into contact with mass, it creates heat. You, Mr. Allard, are the heat and the mass. And so it actually heats your muscle, not your skin. So you do not, your skin remains cool to the touch. When you are outside, working outside, yes, you are getting the benefit of infrared minimally because of the distance between you and the sun, but you are getting hot because the sun is heating your skin, which is why you will see people, especially in Middle Eastern countries that wear long sleeves, that's actually keeping them cooler. We don't have to do that at HotWorks because we don't heat your skin. We just heat your muscle. And the beauty of heating your muscle is, there's a lot of health and wellness benefits in addition to the fitness benefits that you get with HotWorks. CrossFit. They get a lot of decrease in inflammation and active muscle recovery while they're also challenging themselves. So they're benefiting themselves from both enhancing their CrossFit workouts from endurance and stamina, but decreasing their opportunity for injury and increasing their performance level because they were actively recovered before they went back in. So lots of really neat things. And it is something that can appeal to many people, especially those that have joint issues, because we're a no impact facility.
Yeah. So you don't have to be some young, fit athlete to come in here and do a workout or do a program. It probably sounds like something my age would be benefiting from more than throwing iron around.
So I'm 54.
No, she's not. She's just saying that.
1968.
Okay.
Why I always have questions. And Mr. Allard is a few years older than I am. We're an
60?
ideal candidate for HotWorks, but so is a 20-year-old and so is a 16-year-old athlete.
Well, you probably have all sorts of customers.
My favorite customers are my families.
Well, okay. And then we also have another friend that sponsors here. It's Mandy at Creative Concepts, a friend of ours from BNI, as you are also with BNI, as is Gail with BNI. So that's how we all met. But Creative Concepts, so Mandy has provided this nice stuff for you. I'm sure you're a hat wearer.
I am.
Well, here's a hat. You like that?
I love it.
Yeah, Mr. Allard's neighborhood hat that Mandy made. Also, coffee mug.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
For my morning caffeine.
Yeah, right. You have to have that.
Yes.
And so there you go.
I love it.
Yeah, it's good work, and she does really good work. She's done several of these promotional items for many of our friends at BNI, and they all swear by it. And so that's kind of where I got when I saw it. I said, I want to, a little of that action. So there you are. I'm going to share this with your HotWorks page because since it's you, I guess, is that okay with you?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Usually it's just my own show. I don't put it on your page because you got a business to take care of. But still, there you are. I'm trying to make sure we get all of these things posted here.
So while you're sharing that, can I make a disclaimer,
You
please?
can make a big disclaimer.
So I am the owner of HotWorks, and I adore HotWorks. And HotWorks is always a safe and inclusive place for anyone that wants to come and work out. I'm sitting in this chair today as me, myself, and I, Michel Umphrey and Michel Umphrey alone, not as the owner of HotWorks. Of course, I have my own thoughts and opinions and questions, and some of those directly relate to my business, and some of them work directly only to me. So that I ask that everyone understand, regardless of our thoughts and things, government and other, know that you are always welcome and you are always wanted at HotWorks.
And I have other other sponsors, right, that say the same thing. That and probably, you and I've talked pretty extensively. I'm probably more conservative politically than you are, and all that, and that's fine. But you like an atmosphere in which these things can be discussed and without, rancor or accusation. And it seems like it's harder and harder to come by these days. And I appreciate the fact that you're going to be open with just not me, but the audience itself.
Right.
Because we need to have these kind of conversations. And we don't have to walk away from them angry or whatever else. But it seems like that's the only alternative that's going to be presented in other formats.
So there is a lot of truth, unfortunate truth to that. But I think that we also have to remember that we hear that dissension because it's easy to get people's attention with it.
Yes.
But that most people within the context of where we are much more willing to share and listen to each other than what is being highlighted, right? Sensationalized. And so we want to be very careful to not fall victim to getting caught up in the sensationalism of what's going on, which can be very, very difficult with the political environment that we're in right now, because it sounds like that's exactly what's happened in Washington these days.
And Austin,
Austin.
And locally, to be frank. I mean, I had a show yesterday that got quite a response about the school resource officer situation. And I'm not going to make you talk about anything you don't want to talk about, but you do have a unique perspective on this.
I do. I have a dually unique perspective on this. I have never had, nor will I have children in BISD. Both of my girls are thankfully out of public education now and on to careers. I loved every minute of the time that my girls spent in public ISDs. They are better people for that experience. So I certainly understand the challenges that come with having kids in ISDs right now. I was actually the buyer for a large school district here in the DFW Metroplex prior to opening Hotworks.
A lot bigger than we are, by the way.
Yes. And so I have a very unique perspective, not only as a parent who was a PTA president for 2 years and a very active volunteer. And so after 12 years of volunteering for the school district, I went to work for the school district within the purchasing department and then was promoted to the buyer. And what many people don't realize is that there are so many regulations on how schools operate financially and from a purchasing standpoint. And so while I, as a business owner, can make decisions for my business, and of course I have to follow, city code and government code and taxes and all of that, I still get to determine where I spend my money and how I spend my money. School districts don't have that leeway. TEA actually has insane rules on purchasing. And because of that, you are limited in how and where you can spend those monies.
The big issue this week that got the pot stirred was about school resource officers. And I went on the air yesterday saying I was very much opposed to the idea that the city should stop its portion or its support of the school resource officer program and to put it onto a school district police force, a separate force altogether. Do you have any thoughts on that as a parent and or as a buyer, former buyer?
I probably have more thoughts on it as a parent than as a buyer, because that is a unique partnership that doesn't have some of the regulations associated with it that outright purchasing does. So I have 2 girls that either are in or have gone to college, and both of those campuses have their own police force. I will say, and then they went to high school with campuses that had SROs that were municipally based in those high schools.
Okay, so they were city cops.
They were city police officers inside of the high schools. I am not well versed. I understand what took place. I heard your show yesterday, but I'm going to say that I don't like to have a knee-jerk reaction to anything. I like to look at all sides and have an opportunity to form an opinion, not based on hearsay, before I interject my thoughts. My thoughts on this right now are just as Michel, a mom, and that is on a college campus, that police officer does not have the same level of authority as an officer that is coming from the municipality in which that campus is located to do. And simply because that campus officer only has authority within that very small area of campus. And so their ability to follow through, and even the reprimand opportunity, not that I'm a big but just so a healthy fear, all of us probably parented with a level of healthy fear. Okay, so there are a lot of things that I did, but there are a lot of things I didn't do because if my daddy found out that I had done that, the punishment for that was not as great as the thrill of getting away with it, so to speak. It's kind of the same thing with a campus police officer, because their authority and jurisdiction is limited. And so it can't follow through. So if I get a ticket on a school campus, they can boot my car, but they can't impact my driving record.
What about having SROs as opposed to school security at the high schools? Would you prefer police, or would you prefer the school district have its own system?
I'm going to prefer a trained police officer. As a parent, I'm going to prefer a trained police officer. Absolutely.
We were talking a little bit before the show about this. The proposal, which I don't think is going to get very far, or at least I hope it doesn't, is that Burleson would create their own police force. And can you tell me, just as an ex-purchaser, what the ramifications would that be for BISD in terms of just the expense and the equipment of this?
I
It'd be
don't think
substantial,
we
wouldn't it?
have enough time in this show to go through all of the roadblocks that they're going to encounter, because that equipment can only be purchased from a bid vendor. And so they would have to, if they don't already have those vendors on a bid, and there would really honestly be no reason for them to have that type of vendor on a bid. And so if I say something incorrect that can be proved incorrect, I apologize. I'm not familiar with BISD's purchasing guidelines and regulations, so I'm speaking at broad here. But just the equipment alone, let's look at the guns. That's going to be greater than a $50,000 purchase annually for a same type item, which the state of Texas TEA requires that you can only purchase those items greater than off of a bid. Now, in the district that I worked in, they could make it more restrictive, but not less restrictive. And so our rule was if it was greater than a $25,000 annual spend, it had to be purchased off of a bid. When you do a bid, it also depends on how your school district has made those purchasing regulations. And so I used to work for the city of Carrollton, and we had to go with low bid. The school district that I worked in didn't go with low bid. We had to prove that it was the best bid. So maybe it offered a longer warranty. It was slightly more expensive, but the warranty on that product was greater. And so at the end of the day, it was a better value. So we went with best value. I don't know what BISD does.
Well, I'm sure it's similar.
But I can tell you that just buying the guns alone would be a very long, arduous process.
Well, how about vehicles?
Okay. So that's interesting because you already have you usually probably have a fleet in place because you have to purchase buses, you have to purchase vans. So those vendors are already actually in place. And
For police cars?
Well, for emergency response vehicles.
Okay. All right. And also, you'd have radio equipment. You have to have a headquarters.
Right.
So you have to have staff.
Right. So you have to have all that. So financially, no, there's no way for the school district, and this is what people don't understand. There's no way for this, and there's no reason for you to understand because of very odd accounting. There's no way for a school district to just find those funds because your funds are so allocated and regulated by the state already. And let's say you go back for a tax ratification vote, right?
We did 10 years ago, and it failed by 8 votes.
So depending on where you are and how the state has said how much you can charge, for the district that I was in, we were already maxed out. So if we had that election, and let's say we passed a 13-cent tax increase, well, the state got 6 of those 13 cents. But we were really only passing 7 cents up. So it's very complicated. It's very convoluted. If you don't like the way it is, it's not your local school district that's creating the issue. It's the state. And that's where you have to take that battle, which is why I'm here today.
Okay. Well, one last thing. And we were talking about SROs. Even if the city of Burleson wanted to increase its contribution, which I wouldn't support, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take a while. It's going to take money.
It's going to cost you, the person living in Burleson, regardless if it happens at the school district or if it happens at the police level, the city level.
And I think that's one reason I took an exception to the proposal because it was being touted as a savings, and it's no savings. It's just transferring it to another entity and letting them sweat the details. And I just thought, I'm not going to save any money on this, and so. Don't treat it as a cost savings thing. And as far as an effective way, there's no chance I'm ever going to believe that a hired security force is going to be better than Burleson PD. We have one of the best police forces in North Texas, and I would much rather have the kind of gentlemen I saw in the schools, and I mentioned them yesterday, and we still have them now. Much rather have those. Now, we don't have the money to do it like a one on every elementary campus yet, but maybe you suggested maybe something as a good compromise.
I kind of have my own personal opinion on that.
Well, go. You're free to say what you want.
So I personally think there's incredible value in having SROs at the secondary campuses, the middle schools and the high schools. Not because you have an authority with a gun, but because you have a role model that might actually encourage students that wouldn't otherwise see a positive role model in that career and see how they are there to benefit the population at large. They're not there to take away from. Now, that's a give and take. That's a personality too. So I don't want to paint a Shangri-La here with an SRO, but there's a lot of benefit to having an SRO on a campus, just from a role model perspective and showing how they interact with people. And there are relationships that are built there. And I'm not going to say that there's going to be a significant decrease in crime because you have an SRO on campus. But what you do see is a significant increase in knowledge, communication, and relationships because you have that SRO on a campus. And that's invaluable. And I don't know that you can put parameters of how effective it is because you have no way of knowing that because the benefits are very long term. You may not see them for years. At an elementary campus, I don't see the day-to-day presence of an SRO having that same impact, but where I could see it being beneficial is, I think you informed me that BISD has 12 campuses. 12 elementary,
non-secondary
right,
campuses.
12 elementary campuses.
Yeah.
So I think you could probably have 3 SROs that split their time between 4 campuses so that those children are also seeing the interaction and the role that is. It doesn't need to be there every day because some of the other things that an SRO does are not necessarily prolific at the elementary school campus on a daily basis like they are in those secondary campuses. But it's just like when you go to a school district, and BISD is not one of them, but when you go to a school district where they have one mascot all the way through, everybody identifies as X. So you're building a relationship that lasts long term.
Oh, gosh, I could tell you many young men and some young women from BHS still have relationships with Jack Goldman or Jerry Stringer. These names you may not know, of course, but they were SROs. Or Mike Alley was another one, or Brad Schaefer at Centennial. I mean, these guys I know, and they still have relationships with, young men and women that are mid-20s or older because of the relationships formed on campus.
Well, and, Brad, you especially think about how many students you had that were not enjoyable students. They were challenges that went on to become teachers.
Yeah, I do. It's the thing about it is a lot of these guys that may not have thought about it before considered law enforcement and as an option, and some of them got into it. And as far as like troubled students that become teachers, they tend to be best teachers.
They're the best teachers because they identify with those students that are most challenging. It can be the same thing with students and SROs as well. Those kids that are constantly getting in trouble, when they do get that SRO that really genuinely cares about them, it helps them to see that law enforcement is not a negative thing, that it can be a negative thing, don't get me wrong, but it's not designed to be that way. But law enforcement officers are people just like teachers are people and business owners are people. We'll have our good days and our bad days.
Yes, and I'm just saying that this whole program, I think, well, I'm not going to get into it. I'm sorry. I'm not going to go there. If you're interested in my opinion about the SROs, I invite you to go to yesterday's YouTube. We're here talking to Michelle about her thoughts, not mine. So if you want to know what I think about the SROs and all this other business, I had the show yesterday. It's on YouTube, it's on Apple, it's on Facebook. So anyway, let's talk about what you think. Now,
so here's what I think.
All right.
I think before anyone makes a decision about SROs, you need to do your due diligence. You need to go and do the research. You need to think about how this impacts not just you, but the child sitting next to your child and the child sitting next to that child, because school is a collective, not an individual. And so we have to think about how things benefit the school across the board, not how they just benefit your student. Because if we only benefit your student will never get the optimization of education that they would get if we look at the collective. That's very important. We can talk about that from a nutritional standpoint in the body. We can talk about that from a school district standpoint. But my encouragement and the reason that I wanted to be on the show with you today is to encourage people to take back ownership of their thoughts and be responsible for your opinion because you took the time to do the research, not because you listened to Brad or because you listened to me or because you listened to your neighbor. Do those things too. That all helps to bring about a opinion. But Don't just go from hearsay. Put the time and effort that it deserves on your own.
Right. And I guess where I get a little bit offended sometimes when some people who disagree with me think that, I or Sarah Carlson or a few others are leading a bunch of sheep. And I could tell you that's not just offensive on many levels, but it's untrue as well. There was a lot of response to this SRO problem, and those that don't support our opinion are just trying to write it off as, a bunch of herd mentality kind of reaction. There are a lot of people that are responding to this issue because their children are involved, their district's involved. And if the people in making decisions aren't responding to that because they want to shut themselves out or shut themselves off, maybe it's better words, or shut themselves off from being rebutted, they're going to have a real problem, politically and otherwise. And we all will have this same problem. But my only two words about this is, or two phrase about this is that if the people that support dropping this program think it's just some kind of something that Sarah Carlson stirred up or something like that, they're dreadfully wrong, because a lot of people are very concerned about the security of the schools. And the SRO program is one of the best ways to maintain it.
I have no idea who Sarah Carlson is.
I know. She's a friend of mine. She says right there, Sarah Carlson runs a municipal matters page, and she's one of the best sources you'll have for finding out what's going on in the community with, what's going on at the library, what's going on with the parks, what's going on at the Brick. All right. And, but Sarah, she's mentioned you that there, man, she's on the screen there.
Okay.
Sarah is an old student of mine, and we're friends, and she provides a whole lot of information. If I want to know what's going on, say for certain civic function, like at the library, that's where I go to, and that kind of thing. Anyway, I'm going to run through the second set of sponsors. Then we're going to talk about really another thing that's on your mind, and that is you have questions really about why is it being run like the way it is?
Yes.
Why, not just, and I'm not talking about local politics. We're talking about from Washington on down.
Absolutely.
So, but I'm going to run through the second one.
Okay.
You know Otto, of course, over at our place.
It's really good bacon.
Yes, it does. But I wasn't going to bring that up. All right. Now, we met about 10 days ago, and I was supposed to say, she had yogurt and fruit and, all this healthy stuff, but you did have a piece of bacon.
I don't have bacon frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very selective about my bacon when I have bacon.
Yeah.
It's worth the bacon.
Yeah, it's worth the bacon. Yeah, I was just there yesterday morning, and, of course, it's always great. And Otto, is going to be on the show in about a week from Tuesday, but he and Chris, our next sponsor at Wild Cigar, have a very similar attitude about you and your business. They have their opinions. They have very strong opinions, but their opinions. They want people to come into their establishments and it'd be an apolitical environment. Chris will, tell you, if you want to know what he's thinking, he'll tell you, but it's not like, that's a requirement to patronize his bar. And same with Otto, same with any business. I mean, they're very open-minded people. I've had some great conversations with Chris, and he holds up his end of the debate, and so does Otto. So do you, for that matter. And so, these people have thought-out positions that if I don't know my thought-out position, I'm going to look kind of stupid. So, and a lot of people think that already. So, right. But anyway, but this is a good example. It's a good place. Both these places are good places to go. And in your politics, who cares?
So I had a week of decadence because I was at our place, and Hayden and I were at Wild on Friday night.
Oh, yeah?
Very much enjoyed it.
Isn't it a nice place?
Nice spicy cigar and a dang good bourbon.
You like cigars, do you?
On occasion.
And see, that's a lot of people think it's a bunch of old dudes hanging around. No, I've been there several times, and there's, I'd say it's about 65-35, male, female.
Oh, it's definitely more male than female. But I at no time feel, of course, I've worked in an industry of men, so I'm always a little more comfortable being the only female in the room. But nope, it's a great place to go, just kind of chill and unwind and enjoy. So I thoroughly enjoy it.
And then, of course, our friend Tiffany Griffin over at Local Life, I think she's out of town, I'm not sure, but her magazine came out, and one of the most fun magazines was Hometown Heroes, and on the cover is Mary Slaney. Do you know Mary Slaney by any chance?
I know her more by reputation.
Yeah, well, everybody knows her by reputation. She's the queen of Burleson, practically. I mean, she runs that Old Town
but she's a
group.
gracious queen.
A gracious queen.
Yes.
A benevolent queen. And I've had her on the show before. I'm going to have her on again when it fits her schedule. She's so busy, but she's a very sweet woman. And Sarah was in it. Sarah Carlson. I mean, also when Daniel Baisden was in it, and it's a great issue. So go pick it up because it's great ads, and it goes to 30,000 homes. she and I swap advertising, and it's pretty helpful. I do get responses from it. Okay. Now, we were talking about before off the air, and we met before. Your basic question, if I could sum it up, is why is it run like this? Is this the way it's supposed to work?
My real question or concern is,
Mm-hmm.
why are we here?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we at such a point of dissension? We are supposed to be for the people, by the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the people have been left behind.
Absolutely. I believe that too.
But I'm going to call out the people because I think the people, me being one of these people, have been busy with things that we shouldn't necessarily allow to dominate so much of our time. And in doing so, we have lost our ability to impact how things are being done. And we need to step up and make a change if we want to truly see a change. And I have a sign in my studio that says, be the change that you want to see. And I believe in that daily. So, yes.
Well,
I had a piece of bacon.
Yeah.
And yes, I had a cigar. And I did that in public because I want everybody to know that, yes, absolutely, life is here to be enjoyed. But those are things that are done very selectively and very limitedly because my day-to-day is healthy.
Well, here's the thing, is that I teach government classes, as you know, and one of the things I teach is that, we all get focused on Trump or Biden or the national issues and whatever else. But really, it's the stuff we were talking about in the first half of the show, the local issues that impact us the most. And that's where we need to be the most active and most aware because, people say, well, I can't do anything about Washington. Well, probably not other than vote, but you can do a lot about your local community.
So it's a trickle-up effect.
Absolutely. We get it backwards. And I try to tell students that, we get it backwards. We'll teach you the, 3 branches of government and how, all this other business. But the truth of the matter is it's at the ground level, the city, the school, the county, the state. That's where the action is. And that's where these impacts on our life have, the most effect. So I agree with you totally.
So full reveal, I was quite unhappy with the decision that came down about a week and a half ago. So that you understand where I come from as an individual, my grandfather served in World War II. He was on the Wasp that was sunk. He spent about 12 hours in the water waiting to be rescued. My father is a career Army veteran. I literally moved every 3 years, that first move being when I was 6 weeks old, to Germany. My brother spent 6 months in Iraq as an anesthesiologist for the military. So all of the men in my immediate family have served this country. My mom worked for civil service for 30 years while my dad was doing the Army thing. I am proud to be an American, and I am proud to have been a part of service to this country. And those men in my family went to war to protect our rights. So I had a really hard understanding. So what was passed is irrelevant to me right now. It's the fact that something was taken away that I had. And I don't understand why that happened based on the Constitution. And I think that's where a lot of us are really struggling with right now is this whole, it wasn't constitutional and therefore it was taken back. And if they can take that away, what else are they going to take away? Because at the end of the day, my question is this, and I'm being a little bit overzealous in this for the point of having a conversation. Let's just say that group of male majority men at the top of the government aren't going to decide that myself as a female no longer need the right to vote.
Well, you want me to respond as
Yes.
Mr. Allard or just as a host?
No, I want you to respond as the government and civics teacher that you were, which is why I brought that question to you to begin with. Because I know that you and I don't agree on...
Yes, I am pro-life, and I made that pretty clear. But I know what you're... What? Okay, go ahead.
I'm pro-life,
Okay.
but I also believe in choice.
Okay, well...
So I don't want... That statement makes it sound like I'm not.
Okay.
So I feel like that's very important for me to clarify.
No, I accept that. That's fine.
Okay.
I was less unhappy about the Dobbs decision than you were, because I think abortion had become just not just a medical procedure, maybe to save the mother or protect the mother from these consequences or whatever else, but became almost used as birth control, and as a matter of convenience more than it was, a medical necessity. Now, all that being said is about people who listen to the show know that, but all that being said about taking away your rights, the right to an abortion was not based on an explicit writing in the Constitution like free speech or voting. 19th Amendment's very plain. I mean, so there's no possibility of overturning voting rights because it's in the Constitution in black and white, whereas abortion was seen as...
Not for women?
Yeah, 19th Amendment.
So they rewrote the Constitution.
They amended it, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so therein lies the question. So the question for us today is not whether or not I was for or against abortion. That's not why it's why the emotion was where it was, but it's not why the question was brought forward. The question was brought forward as to constitutionally, I don't understand where that comes from. And there's a lot of conversation now about, okay, this was the first of many things that could be undone. So that's where I want to understand more about constitutionally. What does that mean?
Okay, well, here's the drill. First of all, in voting rights, it's explicit that women have the right to vote in all elections. There's no ambiguity about that at all.
Okay.
All right.
Because the 19th Amendment was an amendment to the Constitution
Right.
as it was originally written.
Right.
And we can't overturn that amendment without another amendment?
Right. The 18th Amendment was the one that outlawed alcohol, and that was overturned by the 21st Amendment about a dozen years later. So, yeah, let's say that we had a very determined group that wanted to take away women's right to vote. They'd have to amend the 19th Amendment, and it's exceptionally hard to amend the Constitution. It would take 2/3 in each house of the Congress and then 38 of the 50 states to say yes. And that's not going to happen in any conceivable scenario. It's same thing with like free speech. It's in the Constitution. There it is. All right. There's freedom of religion. There's the freedom to have your be protected from abuse of police procedures, the use of warrants and the presentation of evidence in a trial. These are guaranteed, written in black and white in the Constitution. Now what you're talking about, these other rights that you think are at risk, or maybe. First of all, when we talk about abortion, it was based on an understanding of what the Constitution meant to 7 men back in 1973. That it's a matter of privacy, and therefore the Constitution may not say you have a right to privacy, but it's understood. Well, from the right to privacy, you get to this place of abortion. And so even Ruth Bader Ginsburg and others who supported the abortion regimen said they wished it was based on something more concrete than what the Roe versus Wade ruling was, because it was not based on a specific line in the Constitution. Now, they say, well, if you can take away abortion, you can take away gay marriage, you can take away other gay rights and stuff like that. I'm going to find that much, much more difficult to believe they can do that because of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment talks very explicitly about equal protection under the law. Now, people could have opinions about gay marriage, pro, for, don't care. Most people I know don't care, actually. But they can have it all over the board. But constitutionally and legally, I honestly don't see a way you can prevent gay marriage because the 14th Amendment says you're going to treat citizens equally. And some people may not like to hear this, but gay Americans are just as American as I am or you are, and therefore they have all the rights of an American citizen, including getting married. Now, personally or scripturally, you can have your issues with it. Great, but that's not how we judge law. Does it violate my personal beliefs? Laws may be based on virtues and values, but it's based on secular or non-religious boundaries. And treating people equally under the law is not something that's subject to being taken away. Now, the real problem that you may be referring to is Clarence Thomas and his support of the overturn. He said, we may need to revisit these other things.
Right.
All right. And that's what people are latching onto is what Thomas said. And I think it was a very unfortunate phrase for him to use.
Well, it's not the first unfortunate phrase that's been used.
Well, he kind of let people who have your concerns focus on that. Say, see, they want to do it. He wants to do it. Maybe the other 8 had nothing to do with it. In fact, in the decision we're discussing, the Dobbs decision from 2 weeks ago, Alito, who wrote the decision, made it absolutely clear that this is not to be interpreted as a commentary on other rights.
Right.
He wrote that in the decision.
And so the real question still lies in, and so you touched on that. And so my thing, so where my concern came is if you take a political poll, not a political poll, but if you just take a person poll across the board, especially on something like abortion, that is very, very decisive. General population, you have the law of averages. So let's say you're going to have 20% that are adamantly opposed. You're going to have 20% that are adamantly for, regardless of time or reason. They're adamantly for that. And then you're going to have the rest of the people that remain solidly in the middle. And some swing a little more this way and some swing a little more this way. But everybody is very kind of chronic. And so that ruling felt very not what the consensus of the United States as a whole was having conversations at the dinner table about. And you brought up a very good point, which I think is very important for us to remember when we are having these conversations with each other, because unfortunately, we've lost our ability to respect that we can each have an opinion and be respectful of each other's opinions. But that's also because frequently there's a lot of disrespect when you don't have the same opinion anymore, which is a sad state for us to be in because it keeps us from growing.
Well, here's another, maybe a misconception about that Dobbs ruling is it didn't outlaw abortion.
It did not. And I think that's very important to understand is it has now been put in the hands of the state.
Right.
And so my question to Brad was, do we still live in a democracy? Because it doesn't feel like decisions are being made based on the general consensus of the people. It feels like they're being made on very small groupings of people. And you had an interesting response.
What was that? Do you remember?
That law does not follow popular opinion.
Well, that's true.
But it was such a valid point to be made that's forgotten most of the time, because it's been a really long time since I sat in a government class. And I haven't heard Schoolhouse Rocks in forever.
Well, here's the thing about the democratic aspect of that ruling.
You had a really interesting response to that, too.
Well, it put it back in the hands of the people.
It did.
And so that's a democratic, that's an increase of democracy, not a decrease of democracy. Same thing happened with the ruling last week, which when I get a free day, I'm going to talk about it. When the Environmental Protection Agency got ruled against its latitude just to do whatever it wanted, and basically said, Congress, you're going to have to do this. That is a democratic increasing move to take it out of hands of unelected bureaucrats and make Congress do their job. So the Dobbs ruling may be unpopular because for some people because they live in states in which it's going to be much more restricted, but it didn't affect the access to abortion in California or Illinois or New York one iota. And let's say if people in Texas don't come to some point where they think, well, maybe we're a little bit too harsh or whatever, then there's the democratic process that they can use to try to change it as opposed to rely on some judge. And that's my real problem.
But here's the issue.
Okay.
How many of us have bothered to learn anything about those judges that are on the ballot?
Well, that's not the government's problem. It's our problem.
Yes, and that's why I wanted to be here and have that conversation today. So you'll find that I'm okay with being the irritant.
But that's what the government's built on is irritants in a way. There are people on the left in politics that drive me crazy, but they're doing what the American system not only allows but requires. I don't care for AOC one bit, but what she's doing is not un-American, okay? It really drives me crazy. You might think it's dumb, whatever, but it's not un-American. I've had, when I was talking with Seth Reeves about 3 weeks ago about gun control, we have different opinions about that, but his views are valid as an American. And that's what I think we need to have more of is just, that kind of understanding that we're on the same team. We just may not look at it the same way.
On the same team, and we've gotten so uncomfortable with tension. And so City of Burleson. Kudos to City of Burleson. We had an event last February called University U. And one of the speakers at University U used this incredible analogy. And I wish I had remembered to bring one with me, but they're always very hard to come by in my house. He brought in a rubber band, and it was pretty loose and kind of useless at that point in time. But his point was for a rubber band to reach its potential, it has to have tension on it. That's brilliant because tension creates growth. Now, there's a breaking point, right?
Absolutely.
So if you put too much tension somewhere, then it breaks and it becomes ineffective and literally rubbish at that point in time. So there's a fine line of little tension.
I'm going to see a car hit another one right in front of our eyes here on Crowley. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to see if he's going to happen. Oh, narrowly missed. Anyway, I'm sorry. You're right. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just saw this coming. Like, my
Squirrel.
goodness. Yeah, well, it's right outside my window. But anyway.
That being said, so these conversations are important because growth happens on both sides of that conversation. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you're going to change your opinion, but you may be willing to embrace the other person's opinion a little bit more. And that could have a very small impact on how you move forward in expressing or thinking about what you're thinking again. So there's valid and validity and being a little uncomfortable. And we've gotten to a point we don't want to do that anymore. We just go watch a Netflix show.
Ooh, well, but see, the component you're bringing to this conversation that's missing in a lot of other conversations is good faith. In other words, you're acting on your convictions and you're allowing me to act on my convictions without conflict, offense, or whatever else. We have some people in these political dialogues from Washington all the way down to the ground level here that don't act in good faith. They're not looking to have a debate or an understanding or reach a compromise, which is an unfairly negative word. Compromise is what the Constitution was built on,
right,
and what our system is built on. They're looking for other things. They're looking for influence, power, money, whatever you want to talk about. They want to be a big player, and they're not interested in playing fair. You want to play fair. I want to play fair. So does about 90% of the American people want to play fair, regardless of what their position is. And good faith is what I think we've been lacking in so many ways in the system the last few years.
And so I can only speak for me, myself, and I, but I've become very disillusioned with the system because there does seem to be such a lack of good faith. And so then, human nature is, well, I can't change it, so why should I be bothered to participate in it? And I think, unfortunately, that has put us smack dab in a position that these people not of good faith have a lot of power right now. That's very unfortunate.
It is.
That impacts me as a business owner on a daily basis. And do you know when you impact me as a business owner on a daily basis, you impact me as a citizen within the city in which I run business? Because if I'm not making enough money to run my business, I don't have anything left to give back to my community.
Yeah. Taxes and employees and you buy products and services from the Burleson community.
Right. And so if I don't have money to give back to my community, somebody in my community is not getting what they need. And they may in turn take from someone because they don't have anywhere else to turn at that point in time. So a very dangerous place to be. Now, I'm an irritant because
you're not.
No, I'm an irritant because if this is the middle, my booty's almost right smack dab in the middle of every view that comes to be. I am that person that unfortunately I'm like, oh, that's a good point. Oh, that's kind of a valid point too. So I have a hard time coming to a decision sometimes because I can identify with both sides of the policy sometimes. And you heard me say, don't accuse me of not being, and not that you were, but I'm very quick to say that because I sit smack dab in the middle of that choice too. And I think there are valid responses on both sides of those. And so that's why that particular ruling was hard for me as a medical community, because there are times when there are needs and validity to those procedures. But I also agree with you that at no time should it be a convenience factor. But that's not why I asked those questions. I asked those questions because it was like, gosh, we seem to be so far away in rulings from what I'm hearing all the people around me say. And how have we gotten there and how do we change that? Well, we don't, because law doesn't follow popular opinion. And cannot tell you how comforting that was for me to hear. But at the same time, I'm like, but we're still so far apart in every aspect of things, it feels like right now. We get nothing done in Austin because if the Democrats don't like what the Republicans are voting on, they just don't go anymore. Well, where's the responsibility in that?
Well, here's the thing also. The Bill of Rights itself, by definition, is not for popular majorities. I mean, the freedom of speech that is in the First Amendment isn't just to protect you and I for what we're doing here, but to protect speech that we might find particularly offensive, racial or whatever else, or homophobic. I mean, we don't have to approve of it. We may deplore it, but people are going to be able to say a lot of crap because maybe only 1% of the population may follow, but the courts are going to protect that 1%. All right. And so the popular judgment may be to shut down the Klan or Black Lives Matter or anybody else you want to think of. But that's not what the law is, what the rights are. Same thing with religions. I mean, I'm fairly standard Baptist. A lot of people aren't, but they're entitled to have whatever opinion on religion they want, even if it's in a very distinct minority. And that's what the Bill of Rights is designed to protect, not the popular, but the unpopular. And same thing. Who's a bigger minority, shall we say, or than somebody that's dealing with the law? They have to have protections. The law isn't. The protections are there for all of us, but it's meant particularly for the suspect or the accused. So that's why the ruling itself. I understand why people get all upset. They want to have the court follow a popular opinion, but then what's going to happen when I'm in the minority opinion on something, or you're in the minority opinion on something? Are you going to have that ability to do what you want to do taken away?
No, and I thought that's why the way you responded was invaluable because it wasn't about, and so we get so worked up, right? And then the law comes in. That's the beauty of the law, right? It's kind of like math. It's a little more absolute in its nature than language is. How we use the term weather can be vastly different. And so that's the beauty of math, is it's kind of universally the same. And the law is not universally the same. It's not even the same across all states. But it is more finite. There's less room for interpretation. And I needed to be reminded of that so I could have a more reasonable response to something that I felt impacted by.
And we go back to the democratic aspect of that overturning of Roe. We have different opinions about it, but we're both also now able to express those opinions politically, as opposed to the judges have thus said, therefore, and we're all shut out from that process. Okay, if I lived in a state like California, it has a much more liberal abortion regime than a lot of states, and I don't like it, if I don't want to move, I can campaign against it. I could vote for candidates who are against it. I can give money to pro-life causes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And same thing with people who are upset with Texas, because they have a pretty restrictive abortion law. If they don't like it, the judge isn't going to be the final say. They are going to be the final say, the people, and how they vote, whom they support, whom they give their money to. Okay, so that's why, among other reasons, that was a reason I supported the overturn of Roe, not just because of the content, but I thought it was just a ruling that took the debate of the American people out of their hands, gave it to these 7 judges in 1973, and that's it. And then he tried to do the same thing in 1992 with a follow-up case, said, okay, this is going to be the final word on abortion. They're like, no. You don't get to say that, Judge. I get the final say. I'm an American voter. And so I understand why a lot of people are upset by it. And it's caused a lot of division among people, a lot of division among families who don't all see it on the same page. But my feeling is I'd rather work in a democratic system than have a bunch of judges tell me how it's going to be.
So I will say this at the end of the day as a female with a uterus, because that seems to be a tagline these days.
Yes, yeah.
I really am not impacted by this decision one way or another, because I'm no longer able to be pregnant. I'm past that age, right? So I could literally just say, doesn't bother me, and go about my business. I'm also from a community health perspective, and there are implications when you make absolute rulings about certain things that have a broader impact than people either truly realize or want to acknowledge, is what I'm going to say there. So I think that anytime that there is an absolute on anything, it's probably not good. That there is somewhere in between the two absolutes that is the very best opportunity. My encouragement at this point in time is, yes, of course, you need to make decisions based on how you feel about things, but realize as a teacher, and I used to teach ACT and SAT prep, we always knew that if it was an absolute, it wasn't the right answer. It's the same thing in life, that there are no such things as absolutes. Hot Works is not absolutely the best workout for everyone.
Well, you mentioned the absolutes, and this is one reason, I think among others, why the abortion issue in particular got so heated, is that you had one side said abortion anytime, any place, anywhere, for any reason up until the moment of birth, versus a pro-life side that says no, under no circumstances.
Right.
Rape, incest, health of the mother, that's immaterial. And so you had these
absolutes,
these extremes, and a lot of people say, "Wait, I'm pro-life. I don't support abortion, but I don't want a mother's life to be in danger." So I can understand that one. And you have people that are like you would say, in favor of a woman's choice. Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth. They'd say, "No, I don't want this to be done at any time, any place. Maybe at certain restrictions, but up to that point." Okay, but after a certain point, there should be some restrictions. And so you had a lot of group in the middle that said, wait, I'm not getting, these two extremes are talking for me. I personally, I would never want my daughter or any other female relative of mine to have their life in danger because of a law that says, I'm sorry. And I've said this on my show, there's a big difference between unwanted pregnancies and forced pregnancies, like rape situations. There's a difference.
I think that what gets left out of this conversation is we're very quick to talk about the medical necessity, but we also have to talk about the emotional toil that pregnancy can take on a female as well. And there are implications there also. And I'm putting my community health hat on here.
Okay.
And this is not the place for us to have this conversation. My point of wanting to be on here today and even opening this uncomfortable box, so to speak, is to have a conversation about how important it is to educate yourself on who is running for office, because they have tremendous impact on what your day-to-day can look like going forward.
Particularly at the local level.
Particularly at the local level. And so my call to action and reason for being here today is not to convince somebody of my side or your side or anywhere in between, but to remind us that to be for the people, by the people, we, the people, have to participate. And if you look at voter turnout, especially at a local level.
Oh my, that's another soapbox I've been on.
I could throw more people, and I'm strong, but I'm not that strong. I could throw more people than show up at the polls, right? That has to change. Because here's the thing. If 60% of the people in the state of Texas show up and vote, I'm going to be able to live with that, because 60% of the people around me had their say, voted the way they felt like something needed to be voted for, and we, the people, collectively are now moving forward. Not necessarily in agreement, but we're moving forward because we all had our say. When 16% of the population shows up, I don't feel like we can move forward because we didn't feel represented, but we didn't represent ourselves. So why do we expect somebody else to do that for us?
Well, normally we're running close to time. I run through the ads, but I think we went through those pretty adequately because I wanted to have the extra time to talk about what we're talking about. And I'd like to see you on the show again in about 3 months. You want to do that? Sure. Because we'll be closer to election time. It'd be like mid-October or something like that.
Okay, so we had this conversation, Mr. Allard. I was so concerned about how things were going. What did I ask you?
Oh, gosh, a lot of things, actually.
One of the things I asked you was, what political office would I run for that I could have?
I was going to mention that.
That I could have an impact. And I don't want to run for political office, to be honest with you. I'm not a politician. Well, honestly and truthfully, I'm not a politician. I'm an activist.
That's fine. Well, there's another reason why a lot of people don't run is because it's not because they don't believe in the system, but they don't want to go through the trash that some people will put them through.
Well, if I believed so wholeheartedly in the position that I was running for, that it could truly have a significant impact, I'd probably be willing to go through the unfortunate aspect of running for political office, and we know what that looks like.
Yes.
I just haven't found anything that fulfills that role. And I don't know that that's where my strength lies.
Well, and that's good, and I'm glad to that you're looking for that, and there's a lot of different areas in which one could serve other than just elected office.
Which is what we came to the conclusion of, is that's not my place. If I had to step into that role, would I fulfill it? Yeah, and I'd do it really well, because I'm not going to do it if I'm not going to do it well.
Right.
But it's not where it's not where I would be most benefited from an emotional standpoint, and I don't think it's where I would have the greatest impact in my community at large.
Well, and it is an unpleasant experience running for office. You have to ask people for money, you got to go knocking on doors, and you also got to deal with people that don't play fair, in particular in social media. And we saw that in the last couple of city elections, that it turned a way that I've never seen civic elections go. And I hope we have one coming up in May, and I hope it doesn't go that direction this time. But you never know, because some people just like to see things burn, as they say in that Batman movie. And
that one was lost on me. Sorry.
Well, it's a phrase from, but I'm just saying some people just like to cause trouble. And,
absolutely.
And so I can understand why a lot of people are reluctant. I've talked to 2 or 3 people that had the same questions you did, and they said, I'd like to serve in some capacity, but I don't want to have my name dragged through the mud by some nitwit Facebook page or whatever else. And so it's tough finding qualified people.
So I guess as a business owner, I see, here's the thing. Everybody's like, oh, leave me a review. Leave me a review. Mm-hmm. Okay, so yes, reviews are wonderful. As a small business, I live and breathe by reviews, because people do look at these reviews. But keep in mind, a review is one person's perspective at one point in time. And so it's not a blanket statement for everything. And so if you see reviews that collectively they're all saying the same thing, then yes, there are some outliers. And maybe that negative review is absolutely legitimate. It was a bad day. It was not handled well. And I'll be the first to admit, as a human being, I have those days. I have those days that I could have handled things better than others. And I have those days that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I actually did that. That was pretty good. So it's the same thing on Facebook and on anywhere else that you go. And also remember that there's a big brother element to the social media as well, is that you are being fed what you respond to. Mm-hmm. And so I think we have to remember that. It's a perspective at a point in time.
I always let the guests have the last word. Is that going to be your last word, or would you like another couple minutes just to sum up what you're thinking?
You want to give me a timer?
No.
Okay. So here's what I'm thinking.
No.
I'm thinking at large, most people genuinely believe in the benefit of everyone succeeding, because when one succeeds, more succeed. If only one is succeeding, few succeed. Does that make sense? So if you want to call me a socialist, okay, I am in fitness. I want to see you be healthy. And if what I offer isn't right for you, I'm going to give you a few other suggestions to go and try. Because at the end of the day, you being healthy makes me healthier, right? Because collectively, a healthy group creates more health. It's the same thing here. A respectful group creates more respect. And by creating more respect, we create greater success as a whole. That's what I want people to remember, is that we each support each other. And that if we are constantly doing this to each other, we don't get anywhere but here. So we need to stop doing this and take a step back and embrace what the other person is saying. Don't have to agree with it, but you don't have to be disrespectful about it at the same time. We're going to get a lot further that way.
I appreciate you coming on and speaking your heart. And I'm going, like I said, I'd like to see you on again when we get closer to election time, because you may have some thoughts about that, and you like to give you an opportunity to express those thoughts. Also, next couple of weeks, I have a very intensive local issue show. Blind Debit just kind of worked out that way. If you don't mind me plugging the shows. Well, you're a sponsor. You want me to plug the shows.
Of course.
All right. Monday, Dan McClendon will be here. And we're going to talk about some of the things we talked about just today. Tuesday, the mayor, Chris Fletcher, will be here. And I'm sure we'll be talking about these things again. Thursday, Ronnie Johnson will be here. And his daughters possibly, if they can work their schedules out. But Ronnie Johnson will be here. This will be the first time Ronnie's been on the show. But I've known Ronnie for 30 years as school board member and entrepreneur and council member and whatnot. Then the second week, a week from Monday, Sean Miner, who's on the school board, and we could talk about the school security issues from that perspective and whatnot. Sean Miner is running for re-election, and so we'll be talking about that a little bit, I bet, but mostly about the school issues. A week from Tuesday, Otto is going to be on from our place. He's going to talk about a lot of things that you maybe like to talk about again another time, about running a business during inflation and whatnot.
Global pandemic.
Global pandemics and all this other business. And then the Thursday of that week, Victoria Johnson. So Victoria Johnson's been on the show a few times. So in the next 6 shows will be studio shows, and I'm going to have 5 of them are going to be local decision makers. And this is what I'm stressing.
So I have one very strong political opinion.
What's that?
There is no place for politics in school boards.
Well, I agree with that, and I bet Mr. Miner will agree with that too, because the paramount issue is the education of the kids, not and anything else is indoctrination, and that's just wrong. No, I'm sure Mr. Miner will have that same opinion.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of politicism of school boards across the state of Texas right now.
Yes, Sean's been on there for 12 years, and so he's got the experience. And he has my vote, certainly, and my wife's vote, and most other people I know, because he's served this community, and he wants to serve it again. So, but anyway, that's how I got it. I got Dan, I got Chris, I got Ronnie, I got Sean, I got Otto, and I got Victoria. I feel like I'm a big wheel. I feel like, this is the place to be.
So you started small and you're working big.
I hope so. That's the goal. All right.
right.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Brad.
Michelle. Thank you, Taylor.